Welcome to the Veterinary Rehabilitation Podcast, where we aim to help fellow veterinary rehab therapists increase their knowledge and elevate their practice. I'm Megan Kelly.
And I'm Anae Lloyd. Together, we bring you the latest insights, research, and information in the field of veterinary rehabilitation.
This podcast is brought to you by Onlinepethealth, a leading continuing education membership for veterinary rehabilitation therapists. With Onlinepethealth, you'll have access to a wide range of online resources to help you stay up to date with the latest techniques, advances, and trends in the industry.
Our podcast features in-depth conversations with leading experts in veterinary rehabilitation. They share their own experiences and knowledge to help you improve your practice. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out in the field, our goal is to provide you with the tools and the insights you need to succeed.
So join us as we explore the exciting world of veterinary rehabilitation and help you take your practice to the next level. Hey vet rehabbers, welcome to part 3 in our business series with Maia from the Canine PT Academy. In this episode, we're diving into one of the most powerful yet often overlooked parts of running a successful vet rehab practice, and that's a predictable lead generation system. Francisco unpacks how to move beyond waiting for referrals and starting to build a steady, reliable flow of new clients using tools like your website, Google, and email marketing. You'll learn the difference between organic search and Google ads, the essentials of a website that actually work, and whether or not to include your pricing online. We'll also chat about email automations and why email marketing is still one of the best ways to nurture and convert your leads. Plus, he also covers how to approach social media without burning out, because it plays a different role than Google and actually needs its own strategy. So if you're ready to create a sustainable system that brings the right clients through your doors consistently, this episode is for you. The Vet Rehab Summit is coming up on the 8th of November, and we're so excited to bring you a full day of expert insights, inspiration, and connection. It's all from the comfort of your home. The theme this year is Dynamic by Design, and we're going to explore canine and equine anatomy in motion, diving into biomechanics, muscle activation patterns, and movement science you can apply in practice right away. So the free live tickets are available. Just remember, spots are limited. If you want access to the full lineup and all the sessions recordings afterwards, now's the time to register. You can check out the program and save your seat at vetrehabsummit.com. A quick word from our sponsor before we dive into today's topic. At Paw Prosper, we believe true pet well-being demands a three-pronged approach: prevention, support, and rehabilitation. Our brands are trusted by veterinarians, universities, and rehab facilities alike. So whether you're looking to train, rehabilitate, or help your patients age gracefully, our brands Walking Pets, Help 'em Up, Respond Animal Therapeutics, Fit Paws, Muffins Halo, Sleepy Pod, and Canine Carts offer effective, innovative, and proven solutions. You can sign up today to receive a one-time special gift for all our online Pet Health listeners with your next order. So just go over to pawprosper.com/OPH. And of course, you'll be able to see Paw Prosper and all their brands on the 8th of November at the Vet Rehab Summit. Right, over to Francisco.
It looks like the slides are up. And then today we're going to discuss the importance of developing a predictable lead generation system. So that's what I call a predictable lead generation system, how that can have an impact on your business, and what are some key things to keep in mind when it comes to that. Now, I'm not going to be able to teach you how to build the whole system, right, in just 30 minutes or so, but I just wanted you to at least come out with some key takeaways, some key things, for you to be able to keep in mind with it, if you will. So before we kind of start diving too deep into it, I wanted to briefly give you a background on kind of why I had to focus on developing these systems, because I thought it would be important for you to understand my story behind it, the context behind why I could not rely on veterinary referrals when I opened my own canine rehab business, and why I had to instead understand more and more about this direct-to-consumer marketing approach, and over time develop my own predictable lead generation system. So I'll take it back to September of 2017, all right? And that's when I decided to leave the canine rehab clinic where I had been working for a couple of years since I got my CCRT back in 2015 at that point in time. So I opened there for a couple of years, worked there for a couple of years, and decided to leave to open my own business in Chicago, the Canine PT, which at that point in time, it was a mobile business. So for the first couple of years, it was a mobile business before we built out a clinic. And I literally had to start everything from scratch. I had absolutely nothing, no patience, no business law knowledge whatsoever, no marketing understanding, no understanding of like finances, no connections with the veterinary community in Chicago at all, because I was just seeing patients at that clinic. I was just a therapist, and of course no patients, no clients either, because I wanted to build something on my own. I didn't want to go the route and being, what I would deem unethical, unprofessional, of try to steal clients and patients away from the clinic that I had been on. So that was my challenge, but it was also my drive. It was actually also the thing that kept me going, was to build something of my own, build something from scratch on how I wanted it to provide canine rehab. And to be quite honest, prove people wrong, prove a lot of people that didn't think this could be done, that, told me that, like, why would I do this? Why would I leave, a job that was kind of like cushy and stuff to go out on my own? And I wanted it to prove them wrong. I wanted it to be able to show that, like, no, like this is why I want to do it. So in October of that year, 2017, that's when I was officially open for business, right? And I say officially because I had literally 0 clients. And later that month, I actually got my first one in late October. And it was actually, I didn't even charge them for it. It was a dog that I saw for quite a few months through a local dog rescue, but I exchanged that in terms of exposure on their social media and that kind of stuff. And it was a good way of going about it. I don't regret that at all. It builds some solid relationships over the long term and stuff. But it's funny because pulling the numbers, that by the end of that year, so the October, November, December of 2017, in total for the first 3 months, I had 5 evaluations and 17 appointments. Like, that was it. Over a 3-month period, I had that many appointments, that many evaluations. So, and I think at that point in time, many people would have thrown in the towel, would have thought, oh, this business thing is not going to work. I'm not suited to be a business owner, or whatever it may be. But as you can imagine, that wasn't my answer. Otherwise, I wouldn't be, sitting here in front of you today, giving you this presentation. And after some reflection, I realized that at that time that I was facing 3 major challenges when it came to getting my patients, when it came to get things off the ground. And I think some of those challenges are going to be very familiar to some of you guys watching us right now. The first one is that I was going against, if you will, this well-established integrated veterinary clinic that had been around in the Chicago area for over 10 years already at that point in time. So as you can imagine, they were incredibly well known within the Chicago veterinary community, within the pet community in Chicago, variety of services that they would provide with underwater treadmill, rehab, acupuncture, hydrotherapy, and all that kind of stuff. And after all, they were the first ones in town providing that. And like I talked about already the last couple of days, when you're the first one, you can build a lot of those partnerships, a lot of those relationships and stuff. And they had been around for 10 years already. So literally what would happen is I would meet with veterinary clinics, with practice managers. Sometimes the vets will communicate by email, explaining, hey, this is who I am, and, this is what I do. And then they would tell me that, oh, we already send these patients for rehab at this other facility. And for me, as you can imagine, because I think it would be for you too, that was extremely deflating, because I knew I was offering something very different, not just with the fact that I was mobile and going to people's home, but because of my approach to rehab, of what I wanted it to do was vastly different. So for me, it was a little bit frustrating, because I wanted to be able to show them, I wanted to be able to explain to them why that was different, and I wasn't being able to communicate that effectively. The second challenge was the fact that I'm a physical therapist. I'm not a veterinarian. And at that point in time, 8 years ago, in our area here in Chicago, there was no other non-veterinarians doing rehab on their own. So there was a certain level of skepticism from the veterinary community in terms of, like, why would I refer to a non-veterinarian? And that was definitely a challenge. And I understand, quite honest, where they were coming from, because they were just not used to that at that point in time. Right. So there was that hesitation when it came to it, when it came to them understanding, how canine rehab works and my background and why I got into it and that kind of stuff. And then the third challenge was the fact that as a mobile business, I didn't have an underwater treadmill. And as you likely know, a lot of veterinarians, a lot of people tend to associate rehab with underwater treadmill. And I think it was even worse, to be quite honest, at least for me, 8 years ago, because that's, what this clinic and another place that was around, or still is around, but the two clinics that did rehab in the city of Chicago at that point in time, that was a big focus of their rehab approach. So naturally, through all those years, that's what vets locally associated with rehab on the water treadmill. And I will get the question from them is like, how are you going to do this going to people's homes without an underwater treadmill? Right. And for me, it was such a no-brainer. It's like, well, I've seen plenty of human patients before transition to canines without an underwater treadmill, and they got better just fine. Right. But the challenge became, how do I communicate that to them? Because they don't have the same background, the same understanding that I have when it comes to rehab. Right. And the truth is that I don't blame the veterinary community. I don't blame the pet community for that lack of understanding on what rehab really entails. I think that onus falls on us, canine rehab therapists, who over the years have failed for the most part in terms of educating them on what is that it actually entails, what is that we actually do. Right. So with that in mind, that's when I started asking myself at that point in time, is like, okay, how can I skip this gatekeeper, if you will, like being the veterinarian? How can I instead start directly talking to the pet owner about what I do, about how I can help them? Because the traditional way to market our new business in our field was to try and go to local veterinary clinics and get them to refer to us, much like, PTs and chiros and stuff, do that with in the human world as well. But at that point, I was hitting that wall, and I've realized that traditional way was simply not going to work for me. And that's when I started to come across this concept of direct-to-consumer marketing. And that's when I started to gradually learn more and more about it. And then it got to the point where I understood that if I'm going to make this work, I need to control that narrative. So I started to learn as much as I could about this type of marketing, and the idea of speaking and educating my target audience, meaning pet owners directly, really caught my attention, because I was like, you know what? If I can figure this out, I think I have a shot of making this work. Now, I had been paying attention at that point in time to what other canine rehab clinics around the country, that I deemed successful, at least from the outside, were doing. I would go to their website, I'll check what they're doing, I'll check their social media. I'll try. Some of them I was even able to talk on the phone, because this was like, people that I reached out and I got to meet at like different conferences or whatever. And what I've realized is that none of them were actually doing this direct-to-consumer marketing approach. And that started, of course, creating some second guessing on my own end. Is like, wait, is this actually doable? Right? They were all still really focusing on marketing to veterinary clinics and doing community events and even going online on different like Facebook groups and stuff, within our industry. That's what people would comment, in terms of like what got their business off the ground and whatnot. But what I've realized was that, I had nothing to lose. I literally had nothing to lose. So I decided to just give it a try. Let me learn this. Let me figure it out. Let me see what's going to happen. And to be honest, that's when I started falling in love with marketing. Like I love talking about marketing. I could go on and on, about all this different marketing stuff that we're talking about this week. But that's what sparked that fire on me, was because I started then seeing how this could work. And then over time, of course, seeing the results, both for me and over time, for my clients, my students, my mentees as well. And this might come actually to a surprise to some of you, especially, if you have followed me already, if you maybe listen to our podcast, if you have watched me present at, the Vet Rehab Summit or any other conferences over that in the past. But the truth is that I'm an introvert. Like at heart, I'm an introvert, and I really struggle having small conversations with people that I don't know. So, of course, I could talk about things that I'm passionate about all day long. I could talk about marketing all day long. I could talk about dog rehab all day long, since it's something I'm passionate about. And that's why the idea of direct-to-consumer marketing was just so appealing to me, because I did not mind, for example, going on social media and doing a live Facebook about how we help dogs with arthritis, but getting me to go and do a cold stop at a veterinary clinic to simply drop off some brochures, it was actually something I'll have like panic attacks about, and I'll get anxious about just doing that. So I decided at that point in time to start with that, to start with social media. And that's exactly where I focus a lot of things in the beginning. I would go on social media, I would do posts, I would do live videos, educating pet owners about what canine rehab really entail, about, what we have to offer and all that kind of stuff. And at the same time, I was also having similar conversations with pet owners around Chicago, at local dog rescues, at community events, at networking events with other businesses that then would help make me connections. I was just trying to get the word out there, try to make as many connections as I could, so I could get in front of people and educate them about what rehab, about what we do, and all that kind of stuff. Now, did it work? It sure did. And my schedule got decently busy over the following 9 months, in 2018 at that point in time. Now, was it sustainable? Right? And that's where it's a little bit of a different story, because networking, building relationships, going on Facebook Lives, all that kind of stuff can be a terrific way to get your business off the ground, especially if you already happen to maybe have already some of those connections with the vet community, with the pet community around you that you can kind of like build upon. But the biggest challenge focusing on that kind of marketing strategy is the fact that it required a lot of my time. And as I got busy seeing patients, that time became very scarce. And you can probably guess what happened next is that I was so busy seeing patients, which is, of course, was the goal, so it was not a bad thing, but I was so busy seeing patients that I did not have the time or the energy to do those things anymore. So what happened is that there was a 8 or 9 week period straight between July and August of 2018. And I remember that very vividly because that was when I had basically stopped my PRN job as a human PT to go full in doing canine rehab. But suddenly we went 8-9 weeks straight without a single person contacting us, a single lead, a single inquiry into the business. And at that point, I was like, what's going to happen over here, right? I just quit this a PRN job, and now I'm like all in on this. But now, like, the caseload is going down. I'm not getting any leads, meaning I'm not getting new patients and all that kind of stuff. So what I realized is that although I was able to acquire new patients without having to rely on veterinary referrals, the systems I had built to do so relied entirely on myself and on my own time. So I had to learn on how to build a sustainable and predictable lead generation system at that point in time, because otherwise it was going to be very challenging for me to not only build a sustainable business, but build a sustainable business that it would allow me to grow, which at that point, that was already some of the initial thoughts I had. How can I grow beyond just me? How can I eventually maybe hire another therapist and go from there? And I realized that growing the business and later on growing to hiring staff, opening my own spot and stuff, while relying on veterinary referrals, while relying on networking events, while relying on word of mouth referrals, was going to be extremely stressful. Why? Because although I had control of the narrative at that point in time, I had a much better understanding of how to get my message out. I had no control of how often the narrative was actually getting in front of my target audience. So that's when later that fall in 2018, I really started to try to understand more about websites, try to understand more about Google, both organically and through paid ads, and gradually start to kind of like build those systems up. Now, did that happen overnight? Of course not. Like that was a process through months and years to kind of like really fine tune it. It's still an ongoing process, like especially with Google, they're always kind of like upgrading, changing things now with AI and all that kind of stuff, right? So it takes even more to kind of like keep up with that kind of stuff. So making Google work for you, it does take some time. But when it worked, I knew at that point that I had built something sustainable that then allowed me to, over the next several years, really grow our business, really go from being just me doing all those things for the initial few years to then hiring administrative staff, hiring therapists, opening our clinic in 2020, expanding our clinic in 2022, and really kind of like keep going from that point on. And the reason why I had that confidence to take those next steps, which, as you can imagine, can be very stressful to go through those growths and invest, all that kind of stuff on it, was because I now had built something sustainable, something more predictable when it came to the process of us acquiring new clients. And I knew that Google, along with our website that I built, working alongside with it, working together, created that predictability. And then if I had the staff in place that was able to deliver on things from that point on, build relationships with people on phone calls, build, a customer experience like people weren't getting in other places, and many other factors that kind of like take over after the marketing, that we would be in a great position to succeed. And the interesting thing about all of that, looking back at it years later, is actually the fact that I have been able to help dozens of other canine rehabpreneurs develop and implement those same systems into their business, and seeing them achieve similar and then sometimes even better results than I did, giving me the proof basically that we have built something truly special that can work not just for me, but in a variety of different circumstances, variety of different setups, variety of different locations. And those same system allowed us to not just kind of like make through COVID, but actually expand and hire and grow, and all that kind of stuff that, like I mentioned, that we've done over the last few years. But for all of that to come together, we needed two things to come into place. Our web, when it comes to digital marketing, our website and our Google. And that's what I'm going to be talking about over the next couple slides, okay? All right, so first step is for us to work on developing what I call a functional website. Why? Because people make purchasing decisions on a canine rehab clinic or canine rehab business, I should say, website, the same way they do with any other website, with any other type of business, which is going to be based on the information and based on helping them making a better, more informed decision. Think about it. When you're shopping on Amazon, what do? You read descriptions, you read reviews, you see what people have to say about it, right? Because you want to make a better informed decision. It's going to be the same thing. Now, the problem is that most websites in our field, I'll be straight honest, tends to fall flat because they tend to fail to make that connection with their target audience. And once again, going back to what we've been talking about for a couple of days, it's not about the services that we offer. It's not about our credentials, but it's always going to be about us showing that we have the solution to their problem. And what I call a functional website, meaning not necessarily fancy, not necessarily expensive, but a functional website is going to be the foundation for that business. And there are three main purposes for that kind of functional website. First one is to get inquiries, to get leads, to have people take the next step in their relationship with you. Second one is to build that relationship, right? Educate, provide resources, whatever it may be. And then the third one is to build authority, build trust by providing credibility, by providing, a status of like, yes, this clinic, this provider really has shown that they can help me, right? Now, as we discuss what is important for a successful and functional website, I think it's also important for us to learn what not to do when it comes to it, right? And true story, but one of my favorite hobbies, if you will, I wouldn't call that a hobby, but I like looking at websites for canine rehab clinics in our industry. I have looked at hundreds of websites. Usually, especially if it's a new clinic I come across online, I haven't heard about it. First thing I do, I'll go check out the website. So good chance I have looked at your website if you're watching me right now. But as I've done that through the years, what I've realized is that there were basically three main categories when I'm looking at what people are doing and three main categories of what I call the wrong types of websites. The first one is the resume website. That's the website that the main thing I take away when I'm looking at it is that they're trying to emphasize their experience, their certifications, their credentials, their training, and that kind of stuff, right? And going back to what we talked about the other day, those things are important. We need to always be striving to become a better clinician. So I'm not taking away from any of that, right? But does the pet owner understand those things? Do they care as much as we do about those things, right? And those credentials, those achievements are going to be much more important to us if we actually have the opportunity to showcase that to clients. So the way we portray our experience, the way we portray our expertise is not by highlighting those things, but is by highlighting success stories of patients that we have helped with. Because ultimately, that's what the pet owner wants to understand. It's like, has Francisco worked with a dog dealing with the same issue or similar kind of issue that I'm dealing with right now? That helps build expertise. That helps build, in the eye of the consumer, certain level of experience. So the resume website is the first one. Second one is what I call the medical mishap websites. And that's the website that is focused way too much on the technical medical language that we tend to use with each other, that we use when communicate, amongst our colleagues and peers, right? These websites basically are, I can tell they're written by canine rehab therapists and for canine rehab therapists. And I can read it and I can understand what they mean, but we need to ask ourselves, does the average pet owner understand that as well? Does the average pet owner get what I mean, right? So for example, if a website says something along the lines of, we provide multiple treatments, including therapeutic exercise, isokinetic testing, manual therapy, gait analysis, laser therapy, underwater treadmill, and other modalities, right? I understand what every single one of those things mean, what every single one of those things entail, and how they can potentially be beneficial to the dog. Do you think the pet owner does? For them, none of those things make any sense. They don't understand what it means. The average pet owner doesn't, right? So then it's like, is our message getting across? More likely it's not, right? So then they're not building that trust with you because of that. And then the third website is the do-it-all website. So that's the website where they try to convey that they can do everything, that they are the jack of all trades, but not necessarily the master of none of them. They're portraying that they can do everything, but they're not really honing in on what they are really about, right? And going back to when we talked about a target audience yesterday, we need to be mindful of who we do not want to attract. And if we're trying to please everyone, if we're trying to attract everyone, odds are we're not going to please, we're not going to attract anyone. And then talking about optimizing our websites. And of course, there's so many things that we could go on and on about how we could optimize our websites. But there's two things, at least, that I wanted you to take away from today's training when it comes to it, which is your SEO. SEO standing for search engine optimization, and a way for people to contact you through your website, right? So let's talk about website being SEO friendly first. And it doesn't mean that you have to go out and spend thousands and thousands of dollars to hire a company to optimize your SEO. But you can talk maybe to whoever helped develop your websites about ways to make your website more SEO friendly. It should be part of the package, if you will, when it comes to it. Or you can even do some of this yourself as well, depending on your level of comfortability and whatever platform you use. For example, things like adding keywords related to what you do and your location, Google Maps, something like that, across the homepage and other pages, back pages on your websites. Regularly adding blog posts that not only educate pet owners, but consistently drive traffic to your websites. Adding relevant pictures, guys, that's a big one. It may seem pretty basic, but adding relevant pictures along with pictures descriptions of your line of work, right? And I say relevant pictures because I cannot tell you how many times I go to a website and the picture really doesn't match like what it is that we do. Like the picture has, a dog on top of a mountain and a clinic is like in an urban setting. And it's like, how does that make sense, right? And ultimately, also, please don't use stock images at all costs. You can use stock images if you're just starting and you don't have any pictures of you working with the dogs or your own patients. But as soon as you can, just get some pictures of you working with the dog. Even if it is a family dog, a friend dog that you do like a photo shoot with, like just take a bunch of pictures and then use those pictures to help convey, right? Remember, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And we want to be able to convey the message of what it is exactly that we do. And then find having a way on your website of people contacting you. And the best way I have found through the years is through contact forms. Keeping in mind that most of us, right, when we're searching on Google for anything, right, in this case, we're targeting the pet owner, but even if you're searching on Google for, something for yourself and whatnot, most people are going to do that outside of business hours. They're going to do that in the evenings. They're going to do that over the weekends. So it is extremely important for us to create a pathway that is going to allow them to continue that relationship with us outside of business hours as well. Because if we only have the option for them to call us and leave us a voicemail, then we're probably going to be missing on a lot of them. We're probably going to be missing on a lot of those potential leads outside of business hours that are not able to call us, or even during business hours too. We might miss that phone call and then we miss that lead, right? So we got to keep that in mind. And then the last thing I want to talk about the websites is the question I get quite often of, should I put up my prices on the website? All right. And that's a point of contention. I know, there's no right or wrong. Let me start by saying that there's no right or wrong. There's my opinion. There's other people's opinion. We can all justify it. But for me, I would never put my prices on the websites. The only reason I'll put my prices on the website is if I am one of the cheapest options, right? Because let's go back to the fact that people don't understand what rehab really entails. And in the absence of someone's understanding of what we do and how we can really help them, they're naturally going to default to the cheapest option available. Like we all do. That's just human nature. If we don't understand what's the difference between A and B is significantly cheaper than A, we're going to go with B without even understanding what A really had to offer. Right? So that's why I'm not a big fan of putting prices on a website. Does it mean that the people who are doing it wrong? No, if it works for them, wonderful, right? But what I have found for ourselves, what I have found for my clients over the years is that usually we want to be able to take that next step from going from digital to having a phone conversation. And then when we're having the phone conversation, we're definitely going to discuss prices. We don't want ever someone to come to our clinic for an evaluation not having any idea of how much things are going to cost, but we want to be able to have that conversation with them. We want to be able to build that trust. And that's a whole other process beyond marketing when it comes to building out your business. But if we are putting the prices on the website, there's a lot of people who are not even going to make to the next step on the relationship with us because they're just going to naturally choose to go somewhere else because they don't understand the difference. They don't see the difference on what you have to offer to them. Now that we talked about how to build a functional website, which, with a real marketing strategy is going to be the main way to educate people and take them on the next step on the relationship with you, I wanted to discuss how to get people to your website. And that's when Google really comes in. Now, why Google? Like it or not, they are by far, it's not even close, the number one search engine used in the world today. That might change years from now, but today they're by far the number one engine. And the cool thing is that if you crack Google and how to make that work for you, then basically you're going to have full control of your own marketing without having to rely on someone else, like a veterinary clinic sending you referrals, word of mouth referrals, or anything like that. You have control over that. You have control over the narrative, which is extremely important when it comes to educating people on the value that you bring to them. Here's one thing to keep in mind, though, is that Google's job is to take people to your website. That's it. Google's job is to take them from the search to your website. That's it. Google's job is not to get you new patients. And that's where people get confused. So what do I mean by that? Is that we need to keep in mind the different steps in this predictable lead generation system. And if you're looking at your Google Analytics, if you're looking at the numbers on how your Google is doing, and it says that you're getting conversions, it says that people are going to your website, you're getting clicked, whatever it may be, but you're not getting form submissions, you're not getting phone calls, then that means that somewhere along that process, people are getting stuck. And if people are getting stuck somewhere along the process, more likely than not, the issue is going to be with your websites and not with Google, because Google is doing its job of getting people to the websites. right? And I say this from experience as someone who has, not just ran our own Google Ads now, but like I mentioned the other day, we've been running Google Ad for 8 different canine rehab businesses since January of last year. And of course, there's always going to be some variations in different markets, depending, on people are at their competition for the clicks on Google and that kind of stuff. But what we have noticed is that the website and Google are going to have to go hand in hand to make that work. And then when it comes to Google, we can break them down into 2 different aspects: organic Google, organic reach, and paid ads, right? So let me talk about organic Google first. Now, is Google Ads right for everyone? As much as I love Google Ads, the answer is no. And there are many folks, current clients that I work with, people outside of it, that come to me, asking me about, hey, should I be running Google Ads? Do I need to be running Google Ads? And then I ask more questions. If needed, I'll get in a phone call with them, and I look at their website and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of times I've told them, actually, no. Right now is not the time for you to start running Google Ads. There are other things that you need to be doing first to optimize, to actually make Google Ads successful for you, because if you start running it right now, it's not going to work. And one of those things is a lot of times focusing first on the organic component of Google, because a lot of times people have not focused on that, and that is 100% free. We don't have to pay for any of that, right? So especially if you are just getting started, especially if you are in an area, in a region where there's not that many competitors around you, like, you can really go up on your Google ranking, if you will, by just optimizing a lot of your organic Google strategies, your Google business listing, and making sure that you are building up your SEO to get your website to show on the first page of Google, and your Google business listing to show up on the top 3 searches when on Google Maps, when those top 3 places show up. Like, if you can be on those 2 things, like, you're going to be in a good position, especially depending on the circumstances. Now, there's a lot that can be done to optimize for that. But the cool thing is that a lot of what we discussed already regarding having a functional website is actually going to help with that too, right? But in addition to that, we need to be optimizing our Google business listing. And having a Google business listing, like I mentioned, is completely free, but it's going to allow you and your business to get in front of people. And the goal from there would be for them to either go to your website from your Google business listing, or, maybe call your business, depending on the time of the day, whatever it may be, right? Because like I said, not everyone is going to be using Google during business hours. So that's why people are going to find us both ways. Not to mention that nowadays, a lot of younger people, I don't put myself as younger people, but I am part of the group of people who don't like talking on the phone. And if people can avoid talking on the phone, they're going to avoid talking on the phone, right? So that's where, even going back to our target audience, understanding who is our target audience, what kind of people we're kind of like working with, right? Because I have a clinic in Chicago. My demographic tends to be in the younger side. If I had a clinic in more like a retiring community in Florida, in a town where there's a lot of people that go and retire, that would be different. It's a different demographic. They're behaving in a different kind of way, right? So that's why knowing those things is important. But there are 2 main things that I want you to keep in mind, at least when it comes to optimizing your Google business listing. One of them is your Google reviews. And no one can deny that word of mouth referrals are great. They often bring really great clients, especially if that referral is given, by someone who knows you and trusts you and all that kind of stuff. But the challenge I have found through the years is that we don't control word of mouth referrals. It's very hard for us to have like a grasp on how frequent they're coming. But what we can do is ask those clients to share their experience with us through a Google review. That not only is going to help our SEO, but it's also going to allow someone else to read those reviews and get to understand how we can help people, how we can help their pets a little bit better. And then the second thing is the photos, is the pictures with your Google business listing. So like I said earlier, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And you can upload pictures of your clinic, upload pictures of you working with dogs. Clients can upload pictures with their reviews too and whatnot. But that's also going to be something that is going to help people understand better what it is that you do. And maybe if you have a clinic, what's the setup? What's the environment around your building and stuff, right? So we need to kind of like at least keep those two things in mind when it comes to it. And then we can talk about paid Google ads. And as you can imagine, there's a lot that we can talk about paid Google ads that even goes, well over my head too. I have a very good understanding of it, but I'm not a specialist per se. But there are a few things that I wanted to mention for you all to at least keep in mind. First one is the keywords. There are, I believe, if I remember correctly, 11 different types of Google ads that a business can use. And the most popular one by far, and the one I recommend, is what they call a search campaign ad, which is based off keywords. So for example, if someone is searching for dog physiotherapy or dog rehabilitation near me, then your Google ad would show up in front of them, potentially, right? If you're using, for example, dog rehabilitation or dog physiotherapy as the keyword. Now, keeping in mind the way Google works, guys, if you're not familiar with it, is what they call a pay-per-click, all right? Meaning, if the Google ad's getting shown to someone, you're not paying for that. You're only paying if someone clicks on that. Now, how much that click is going to cost you, that's going to vary so much, depending on the keyword itself, how competitive it is. Are there other businesses trying to bid for that keywords and like that kind of stuff, right? So that's hard to pinpoint how much that's going to cost you, but that's the only time you pay for a search campaign ad. And there are different schools of thought when it comes to the best way to optimizing keywords and how many keywords to have it. What has worked well for us is try to keep that number limited to somewhere around like 30 to 50 focused keywords that highlight what you do, highlight, the different things that you provide and all that kind of stuff, the different conditions that you treat. And there are like platforms, softwares and stuff that can kind of like even help you sort out what those keywords can be. But as you can imagine, even running, Google Ads account for our clients, we see some variation between different places, different cities. Sometimes some keywords tend to do a little bit better, but, there are definitely keywords that can work, pretty well across the board, and definitely keywords that are super relevant to what we do that we should be using, like, dog rehabilitation, dog chiropractic, dog physical therapy, physiotherapy, like all those, pretty kind of like straightforward keywords should be things that we should be using. Let's see. Actually, Vero has a question exactly about that. What sort of keywords do you use for your SEO? As rehab practitioners, we know the words we use to describe ourselves, but regular people don't usually know these words. I feel like they usually know us as physical therapists, but at least where I'm at, that is legally protected term I cannot use. Right. So you cannot claim on your website, if you're not a physical therapist, that you do physical therapy, but you can still use that as a keyword on a search term. And then people go to your website and you talk about how you can actually help them. Now, the thing with that is that if they're looking for something specific, so let's say acupuncture, and they go to your website and it's talk about, underwater treadmill, then they're not going to be like, oh yeah, this is what I was looking for. Right. So that's where going back to the message, going back to the problem, the solution, that kind of stuff, it's going to be key. Because even if someone was searching for something related but different, they can still connect with the outcome. They can connect with what you can help them with, Vero, right? So yes, you cannot use terms that you are legally not allowed to provide on your website and your brochures and your marketing materials and stuff. But keywords is a little bit different because you're not claiming that you do that. You're just telling Google that hey, if someone is searching for that keywords, that's a potential person, that's a potential customer that might be interested in what I have to offer, right? So hopefully that makes sense, but let me know if you need me to expand on that. So we talk about keywords, then we also need to talk about negative keywords. And that's one of the most important, but a bit tedious tasks when managing a Google Ads account, is to keep an eye on the negative keywords. But that's going to be extremely important, especially more so over the initial few months of managing a Google Ads account, which is what we call the learning period with Google, because that's when Google is still trying to figure it out, who is your best potential customer and who should we put, these ads in front of. And negative keywords are going to allow you to tell Google which one of those you do not want your ads shown to. Keeping in mind that you only pay for a Google ad if someone actually clicks on it. You don't want your ads showing up to someone who's searching for something completely unrelated to what you have to offer. So for example, if your veterinary clinic focuses on rehab and integrative medicine for pets, and you don't see like patients for ear infection, for example, you don't want your ads showing up for how to help my dog's ear infection, right? If you are a veterinarian focused on rehab, acupuncture, chiropractic, then you probably don't even want your ads to show if someone is searching for veterinarian near me, because if they're searching for a veterinarian near me, they're going to be more than likely looking for regular veterinary care. And as you can imagine, veterinarian, it's a highly bidded keyword, meaning there's a lot of veterinary clinics around. You try to bid for that keyword, which makes it more expensive, right? Your click is going to cost more when it comes to that. So then suddenly your budget ended up going to keywords that are not very relevant to your target audience, right? That's why negative keywords are so important. It's tedious, but it's so important to make sure that we're optimizing our Google Ads as much as we can. Now, the one thing I wanted to talk about too is, what if Google has not worked for you guys? Because I get that question quite often too. It's like, friend, I've tried Google, I've tried this, and it just did not work for me. Now, what I tell people is to remember that the goal with Google is to help people take that next step in the relationship with you, either by contacting you or going to your website, whatever it may be. And most people are going to be searching outside of business hours, right? So I'm a big proponent of making sure that we're making it as easy as possible for people to take that next step in the relationship with us outside of business hours. But Google is only half of the equation. Google only does half of the job. Like I said earlier, they get to a certain point, and then it's up to your websites to have a clear message that connects with them and all that kind of stuff. And it then allows them to take that next step in their relationship with you. Otherwise, they're going to go to your website, and then they're going to come straight back to their search and go to the next one that popped up on their feed, basically, right? And experts in marketing say that usually we have about 10 seconds to get someone's attention when they go on your websites. Otherwise, if we don't get their attention, they're going to hit the back button. So we need to be able to get that message across to them so they can at least keep looking, keep reading more about what we have to offer them, right? And also remembering that Google is basically the problem to your solution platform. And although some people might have been looking specifically for what you have to offer, a lot of them weren't necessarily considering rehab, considering acupuncture, consider whatever it is that you have to offer as an option, but they found you and they laid it on your website. That means that you're going to need to build a nurturing and a follow-up system to build and nurture their relationship with them. Because a lot of them won't necessarily be ready to commit to book an evaluation with you right away. And those systems also can get very complex and stuff. They don't have to be, but they can get very complex. But they must include a proper way of handling that initial phone call, along with a combination of automated and personalized follow-ups as well, including emails, texts, follow-up calls, and whatever it may be. And that's when an automated email nurturing system can work incredibly well, especially when we couple that together with standard processes and procedures inside our own business, where someone also is in charge of contacting people and checking on them and answering questions and whatever it may be. And all of those pieces of the puzzle need to come together for us to be able to get the most from Google, for us to be able to get the most from this whole predictable lead generation system, because not everyone's going to be ready to book an eval right away. I'll actually go a step further and say that most of them will not be ready to book an eval right away, especially if the price point is a little bit higher than what they thought it would be. And more likely than not, it is going to be higher than what it should be, higher than what they thought it would be. Otherwise, you're probably not pricing yourselves accordingly. A certain level of pushback about a price is actually a healthy thing. Now, how we handle that, that's the real question. And having a nurturing system is going to be vital to make all of that work. And one last thing to keep in mind in case Google has not worked for you is us to be honest with ourselves and reflect if we have given it enough time, enough resource, enough energy to make Google work for us, right? Usually I tell people, like, we got to give at least 4 to 6 months with consistently tweaking, optimizing, all that kind of stuff along the way to have enough data to know what's working and what's not working. The problem is that most business owners don't give that enough time. And if they don't see results in 1 or 2 months, they're like, this is not working. And they jump ship and they go, to whatever is the next thing that they want to try. So sometimes you got to give it time. And Google does require a little bit of time to kind of like figure out how to make it work. And finally, the last thing I wanted to mention, we're pretty short on time, is social media. But there's actually not a whole lot to talk about social media, guys. So if you guys remember when I shared what got me to this point, I did a lot of social media in the beginning. This is back in 2017 to 2018. Now, keep in mind, social media at that point in time, if you guys remember, it was very different, especially when it comes to Facebook. It was very different. I would do a Facebook post and that would get tons of reach right away. Nowadays, if you guys run a business profile on Facebook, you barely get enough reach. You barely get enough reach unless you run paid ads. And that's how social media has shifted. Now, there are other platforms too. I think if there is a platform that canine rehab therapists should really be focusing more is actually Instagram. TikTok, not bad either, depending on your target audience. But Instagram is where a lot of our target audience is going to be. And then you can automatically share from Instagram to Facebook because they both belong to Meta, right? But I wouldn't worry so much about how's it doing on Facebook and worry more about, is it getting traction? Is it getting reach on Instagram? But keeping in mind at the same time that those are all the cold leads we talked about on Monday, right? Those are not necessarily going to be people who are going to be ready to book an evaluation with us right away. Now, if you have the right strategy behind it, it can still work. And what I mean by the right strategy, it would be long-term brand awareness and education, for example, right? Building that awareness, building that community, building that educational component so people that follow you can understand over time better what you offer, what you have to do, what you have to offer them, and how you can help them. So that way, when they need that help or a friend of theirs need their help, they kind of like remember, it's like, oh yeah, I keep seeing content from this dog rehab clinic accounts that I've been following for a while. You should check them out, right? The other great way to use social media is to promote specific events. So for example, if you're going to be running a workshop, if you're going to be running an open house or something like that at your clinic, great spot to promote that. Facebook loves that. Facebook, right, wants the platform to be more of a community, right? So they want to be showcasing kind of like that kind of stuff as well. But that's why I also decided to spend more time today talking about Google and websites and not as much as social media. It's based on my own experience, guys, that what worked 6-7 years ago just does not work the same anymore. And this is not to say that social media doesn't work at all, because you might know some people in the industry that social media works well for them, and that's okay. But if I have to pick where to focus my energy, where to focus my resources, I'll pick Google and I'll pick our website any day of the week at this point in time. Now, 5 years from now, I don't know. Things could change, right? ChatGPT could become the top search engine at that point in time. Who knows, right? We don't know what's going to happen, But what I can tell is that today, I wouldn't worry and focus so much on social media for the day-to-day stuff, unless I have a specific event, a specific thing that I'm trying to kind of like really promote or anything on, and I'll focus more on the other things that I talked about. Let's see, but that's where we are at.
Okay, super. I love that. Thank you so much.
All right. See everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the subscribe button so you get notified every time I load a new podcast. I'm here every week talking to vet rehab therapists from all over the world about all things vet rehab. A big thanks to our sponsor, Paw Prosper. Their sponsorship allows us to be able to give this podcast to you for free, so please go and check them out at pawprosper.com. Don't forget to bookmark the next Vet Rehab Summit on Saturday, the 8th of November, 2025. Come and be a part of the world's largest online veterinary rehabilitation conference created specifically for you, the vet rehabber community. Onlinepethealth members get VIP complimentary access to the Vet Rehab Summit. For more information about continuing education for vet rehabbers, you can go to onlinepethealth.com.